Picture this. You're deep in the woods, miles away from cell service, surrounded by the crunch of leaves underfoot and the murmuring whispers of the trees swaying in the night. The stars above are brilliant, undimmed by city lights, and your only source of light comes from a flickering lantern resting on a rotted log. You're camping, free, wild, alive, or so you think. In this video, I promise you've never heard anything like this before. Stay tuned, because by the time we're done, you may never look at a peaceful woodland trail the same way again. This is the story of Echoes of the Lantern, the ghost of the lost campsite. Our story begins decades ago, in a secluded part of a sprawling national forest. This location was popular with campers and hikers, but it wasn't just the fresh air and stunning vistas that lured people there. It was the whispers of a mystery tied to a lone lantern light that was said to appear in the thickly wooded areas, only for the person chasing it to be drawn far off the trail. Inevitably, these people vanished without a trace, their tents left pitched, their belongings barely disturbed. One such camper was Jennifer Ellis. She was an avid outdoors woman, seasoned in wilderness survival. Her last known account takes place in 1978, when she ventured into those very woods, as she had so many times before. Jennifer liked to set up camp in a clearing, always careful to mark her location on her trail map, always cautious not to wander too far from her sight. That night, Jennifer managed a roaring campfire. The embers snapped and popped, sending glowing sparks spiraling into the cold night air. The tent was set, her dinner had been cooked, and Jennifer was writing in her journal when she noticed something peculiar. In the distance, well beyond the amber glow of her fire, hovered a cool, bluish light, almost like a firefly, but unmoving. Her instincts, usually sharp and reliable, dulled by a strange, magnetic curiosity. She thought, perhaps it's another camper, perhaps a hiker lost in the woods. So she yelled, "Hello? Do you need help?" The light flickered beseechingly back, almost like an answer, but no voice responded. Jennifer put on her coat, grabbed her flashlight, and marked her map before approaching the strange light. She followed it deeper and deeper into the woods. As she walked, she noticed the crunching of the ground grew softer, almost muffled, a soaking wet squelch, as though the earth itself was absorbing her movements. Then her flashlight flickered. She replaced the batteries earlier that same evening, yet it began to dim before blinking off entirely. She cursed and fumbled to no avail. Now surrounded only by darkness and that eerie glow of the lantern, Jennifer, for the first time, felt a spike of fear. She decided to head back, but the trail she marked somehow no longer existed. There was nothing under her feet but moss and strangling vines. The history of the lantern dated back even before Jennifer's disappearance. Locals tell of a hermit living in those woods a century prior. He was a woodcutter by day, a recluse by nature, and often carried a curious blue lantern, an heirloom handed down through generations. One winter night, the hermit's cabin was ravaged by fire. He wasn't seen walking into town for supplies the following spring or ever again. When checked by the local deputy, the weight of the soot-ridden ruins seemed silent except for some inexplicable hisses, like whispers in a language of forgotten winds. Soon after, wanderers walking near the site's ruins began spotting the flicker of a lantern dancing in the deep woods at night. And here is where the story takes an ominous turn. You see, everyone who admits to following the light either never came home or returned only for their footprints to vanish half a mile behind them as though they'd walked out of a dream or a nightmare. Jennifer never returned either. But here's where it gets unsettling. Years later, a group of college students on a camping trip ended up in that same forested clearing. The trail was old, overgrown, but curiosity hooked them. They didn't know about its dark history or Jennifer's unfinished story. Nights were uneventful until the third evening when one of them, Megan, spotted that same unearthly glow beyond the campfire. Megan chose to chase it before anyone could stop her, muttering, "If it's a prank, we'll laugh later." She disappeared into the undergrowth. The group followed her distant cries of, "Wait up! I see it ahead!" But the more they ran, the further away the voice became. Each time she'd shout something like, "So close, you guys!" though quieter and fainter than before. Eventually, silence engulfed the air. Night's bite grew colder. Megan didn't answer their calls, and her phone's faint humming ping for GPS tracking fizzled beyond coverage. The students dared not trek deeper, marking Megan vanished by sunrise. But the most terrifying twist. One of them swears they saw Jennifer that night, or a figure with her likeness, washed pale under bluish light, clutching a lantern tight to her chest. Her face wasn't pleading for help, though. It was warning them to turn away, as though two sets of opposing forces had trapped her, endlessly wandering, endlessly calling the next to join that inexplicable fate. To this day, park rangers refuse to discuss certain cases outright. Documentation remains vague. Current trails subtly block certain paths without explanation, but to anything immune to skepticism. That glow, that exact hue, sometimes pierces twilight, closest near faint places down that supposed lost campsite cove. Yet ignored or heeded when reflections saved those escaping potentially manipulated illusions, cloaking victims, re-experienced baits one after another. Pattern time stitched ahead. Now you'll relive exciting twists yourself, unfolding questions instead, yielding own moments, arriving crossroads, intending merely perfect bracing, eerie. Campfire chills, awaiting ambient fence reverberations, guiding imagination relayed spoken, endearing prompt worth. Lantern. Spin. Faiagal. Forever. Dark sought L. Detected imminent foe.